Ah yes, beginner Loomians, the creatures we start out our lovely adventures with, only to be dumped in a PC box and be left to rot because unlike Pokemon, the game isn't finished yet, meaning that for you to get any entertainment out of it, you're gonna have to move on to better things. There are currently 7 beginner Loomians in the game, each with a 3-stage evolutionary line. We got Umbit, Feline, Vambed, Dripple, Snowcup, Weevil, and Eaglet. Apart from their performance in battles, most people pick their starter by looking at their design. And looking at the final stages of these little critters, most people would be able to decide which one they think is better based on their design alone. Every Loomian needs a good design, but the beginners need the most care and creativity put into them out of any other Loomian, simply because they are your first impression of the game. It's pretty clear that there isn't a 100% way to determine which of these beginners have the best design, but with the help of my opinions and some research on their origins, I've managed to figure out what it takes for a Loomian design to be good. And so, with this criteria that I have come up with by myself because I'm so smart, I will try to determine which of the beginner Loomians have the best design. Before we begin, however, I want to remind you that these are completely my opinions, and what I might consider a good design could be completely different from what you consider a good design. Also, just because I say a beginner has the worst design out of the bunch doesn't mean its design is bad. It just means it's my least favorite and the one I think is the least creative. Looking at all the final forms, it's pretty easy to see that a lot of work went into designing these creatures. And they are all beginners for a reason after all. So without a further ado, let's jump right into it. Before we identify what the heck a good design even is, we first need to identify what a bad design is. Looking at the list of Loomians, there are a couple that you might consider uninspired, such as our good friend Krakaloa. But from being a play on the word Krakatoa, which is a volcanic island, Krakaloa is literally a volcano with a face slapped on it, and that's it. Doesn't mean you can't like it, it just means that I find its design boring. And that's it. So now that we have a better idea of what I personally consider a bad design, let's take a look at the beginners. At a first glance, all the beginners and their lines look pretty good. So to find out which one's the best, we're gonna have to put some criteria up. Appeal. How cool/good does the Loomian look? Basically how appealing it is. It's in the name. Creativity. How creative or clever its origins are. Bonus points if its name has some play on words or clearly defines the Loomian it's talking about. Finally, cohesion. How well do the Loomians from each line flow into each other? If a Loomian line lacks cohesion, the final form may appear jarring or out of place. Right, now that we got some criteria, let's anger literally anyone that likes the, in my opinion, 2 worst beginner lines, Embit and Snowcup. These lines may appear pretty good at first. Well yeah, look at them. They clearly got a good sense of cohesion. Every Loomian flows well into its evolution, except maybe Snowcup and Snowkey. That's weird. They're both also pretty appealing. I mean, a Flaming Rabbit Knight and a Viking Yeti do sound pretty cool after all. So what's the problem? Well, there really isn't much of a problem. As I said before, none of the beginners are bad in any way. These 2 are just the ones I find the least good. So let's take a look at the creativity of the final lines and the definitive version of each starter. Seer Knight is based on rabbits and knights. Wowee! Its name perfectly describes this with it being a combination of seer and knight. Also by rabbits and knights, I meant fire and knights and rabbits. So yeah. As for Himber, its name is derived from Himalayas, and one of the most famous mountains in the world, as well as the expression burr, which is typically used to describe someone being cold. Ember also takes some inspiration from Vikings due to its horns, shackles, and weird leather skirt on its waist. I'm too lazy to Google what that's called. As I said before, there's nothing wrong with this, it's just that I find them the weakest in terms of creativity. I mean, Seer Knight is just a fire rabbit with inspirations from knights, and Ember is a Viking yeti. Again, these are pretty cool, but I feel like the other beginners are more creative and appealing than these two. If I had to choose, I'd say Ember has the better design, but it doesn't beat out Seer Knight by that much. The next two we're going to throw into the void of screaming 7-year-olds will be Luminami and Vasparatu. These two have one thing in common. God, those middle stages suck. Riptide looks like it swallowed a bunch of helium and then proceeded to go to McDonald's. And Dimpire... yeah, he's seen some stuff. The first and final forms more than make up for it though, since Luminami and Vasparatu are some of the most appealing Loomians. Let's start with Luminami. Its name comes from the words illuminate and tsunami. Wow! Luminami is based on the anglerfish, which I am not willing to look up because my god, those things are terrifying. It also takes inspiration from various lizards, making it fairly complex compared to the other beginners. Then there's Vasparatu, the vampire bat. Vasparatu actually has one of the most complex names out of all the beginners. The first part, Vesper, comes from the Latin word for bat, which is Vespertilio. The second part, Atu, comes from an old vampire movie called Nosferatu. I hope I pronounced that right. Its head also takes a bit of inspiration from foxes, fluffy ears and all. Even though the middle stages are quite ugly, they still flow reasonably well into each other, and both of these guys have very interesting origins, which is what puts them above Ember and Seer Knight. Vasparatu's design may appear simple at first, but its name honestly made me have a newfound appreciation for the Dracula-inspired bat-fox thing. Luminami is also a combination of multiple animals, which weirdly enough makes it seem more realistic. Couldn't tell you which one of these two have the better design, since they're both filled with creativity and overall appeal. The only reason they aren't any higher is because the other three are just so good and creative, to the point where I'd say they're even better than some starter Pokemon design. So now we're down to the final three, Tata, Zulong, and Valkyrie. Let's get Tata out of the way so that we can cover the other two. Tata's name comes from Tatib, stick used for fighting with martial art. In fact, it's the very same one Tatab's holding right now. Kind of. The other part of its name comes from Tabby, which is a striped pattern found on house cats. What elevates Tatab above the beginners below it is its wonderful sense of cohesion. Whoa. Probably having the best one out of all the starters. The jump from Felver to Tatab is a bit odd, but it's reasonable enough. I find Felver a bit too similar to Vivine, and I think adding some leech from Tatab would improve it quite a bit, but Tatab's appeal is also pretty good, and in my opinion, Vivine is the best out of the first stage beginners, with Vampat being a close second. Tatab isn't spectacular, but it has an incredibly solid design, and I gotta put it this high because of that. Now we've reached the final two, Zulong and Valkyrie. Let's start with Zulong. Zulong's name is a combination of Zeus, typically depicted as the god of thunder, and Long, which is a Chinese word for dragon. Also, Zulong is pretty long. Yeah. It's pretty clear that it draws inspiration from Chinese dragons, and its pre-evolutions are based on weasels. You might be asking how a weasel turns into a dragon, and I went and did some research, but I couldn't find any legend specifically where a weasel turns into a dragon. Closest thing I could find is the Raiju, which is a Japanese legend which usually depicts a badger. cousin of the Weasel as the god of thunder, which draws similarities to Zulong with the electricity and all that. Apart from that, there really isn't much else I could find apart from just some normal dragon legends. If you happen to find the legend where a weasel turns into a dragon, please let me know in the comments, that'd be great. If this legend does in fact exist, then that means that Zulong is one of the most creative origins, and if I'm being honest, it's the coolest out of all the beginners. Look at it, it's a dragon. If I drew this in an art contest or something, I'd probably lose horribly because I can't draw it to save my life, but the design is still cool nonetheless. Valkyrie's origin is a lot more simple, which means it's a lot more easy to figure out. Valkyrie's name is a combination of falcon and Valkyrie, a female figure from Norse mythology that usually wears a bunch of armor, just like our feathered friend here. The weird thing is that Valkyrie's male to female ratio is incredibly one-sided, with males pretty much being the vast majority of the Valkyrie population. Anyway, apart from that, Valkyrie also draws inspirations from griffins, creatures that are a combination of an eagle and a lion in legends. It also has a sword as a tail, which sounds incredibly dangerous, but we're talking about creatures that can breathe fire and shoot giant thunderbolts at each other that you can put in your pocket, so I guess it's not that unrealistic. Valkyrie has an incredibly appealing design, and its pre-evolution eaglet is probably the most popular first stage beginner, and I can definitely see why. Look at its little haircut and its little beak. Cute. So which one of the two is the best, Zulong or Valkyrie? In my opinion, Zulong looks cooler, but Valkyrie has an incredible design too. Well, I guess there is one way to settle this. This stupid, hideous, ugly, horrifying creature. Stozap looks like it got run over by a car with rolling pins for wheels. Hell, why does its body curve like that? Why is its head shaped so weird? What is up with its legs? Also, the jump from this to Zulong is incredibly jarring and barely makes any sense. Torpri, on the other hand, actually looks kinda cool, apart from being bipedal for absolutely no reason. I mean, it looks like it could be an actual creature and not some kind of food you'd find at a fancy restaurant that charges like 80 bucks. Despite the fact that its food is comparable to other food which is much cheaper, meaning that what is the point of going to this expensive restaurant in the first place? In conclusion, Stozap sucks and brings Zulong down with it just enough for Valkyrie to swoop in and steal the throne with its much better cohesion and middle stage. There is no contest here, just look at those Stozap, please go away. So there you have it, my opinion on all the starter designs. So what do you think? Do you think I'm completely wrong and that my opinion should be thrown in a flaming trash can? Great, I honestly expected as much. So if you enjoyed this video, just leave a good old like, because it's nice. And that's literally it, it's just nice, and I like it. Was that a okay, yeah. Also, subscribe if you want to, I guess, because I'll probably make more videos like this in the future. Sorry it took so long, but editing takes a while. Alright, see ya later, guys. Bye-bye.